What is your view of God? Is he like a powerful creator who can do anything? Or do you kind of feel like he dropped you on this earth to fend for yourself? Today, I'm hoping you will be totally wowed by God as we learned who he is and what he is capable of. Good morning. Welcome to our Women's Bible Study. Glad you're joining us today. We always say this at the beginning. If you want to know more about our ministry, go online to womensbiblestudy.com. You can get handouts for today's lesson. We are in a series called Been There, Done That. And what's totally amazing is that today is our final lesson in this series. This is lesson number 26, which means we've been going at this for many, many, many weeks. And in these 26 weeks, we've learned valuable lessons from all the different men and women in the Bible. Now, in the process of doing this particular series and figuring out, like, okay, who should we talk about in the Bible? Like, which man or woman should we do a lesson on? I came across a name that I realized I didn't want to do an entire or just one lesson on, but instead I wanted to do an entire series on him because he's kind of awesome. So what's going to happen next week is we're going to start a brand new series, and we're going to actually call it Backslidden, and we're going to do this on, we're going to talk about the man named Jeremiah from the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament. Now, I think a lot of the reasoning why I want to do this particular series is I think the United States, like Israel, I think we're kind of becoming a backslidden nation. My fear is that there's so many people out there that are claiming to be Christian, like, well, of course I'm a Christian because I asked Jesus in my heart when I was 4. And so what happens is they use this word like, well, of course I'm a Christian, but I'm just a little backslidden right now. And somehow with that word, they just assume that God's just okay with it. And what you need to know today is that God is absolutely not okay with people living backslidden lifestyles. And we're going to learn that from the Israelites in the time of Jeremiah. What we're going to see is what exactly were the Israelites doing that made God so incredibly upset? And why did he say over and over and over again that this is a nation of backslidden people? So we're going to learn tons and tons of lessons from Jeremiah about false teaching and false prophet and what's going on in America. We kind of look a lot like Israel right now. But Jeremiah was one man who was called to confront the people and try to get them to listen and to come back to God. And hopefully we'll be able to look at our own lives and say, you know what? Do I even remotely resemble what was going on in Israel? But today, as we leave our Been There, Done That series, I know for me personally, I have just learned a ton from the men and women in the Bible that we've been studying. They've been in places, tough places where I know someday I may be, or maybe I already have been. I know they've done things that I may do someday, and hopefully we've learned valuable lessons on how we should respond instead of, as a good way instead of a bad way. So today I was trying to figure out, how do you end a series like this? Because we talk about all the people in the Bible who've been there and done that. So today I want to end with the ultimate one who has been there and done that, and that would be God. We're going to do today's lesson on God because, think of this, he's been there since the very beginning. He's done that. He's created the earth and galaxies and everything that we see. He's done amazing things. He's the perfect one to study. Dusty's in college right now. And he's in this biology class where they're basically teaching him that there's no God, and you're crazy if you think there's a God, and that everything in this world just happened by chance. Dusty says, Mom, what I see, I realize cannot possibly have just happened by chance. Dusty's reminded of this verse in Romans 1:20. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky through everything God has made, and they clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power, and divine nature, so they have no excuse for not knowing God. He says, Mom, what I actually see in this biology class, with cells and it goes down to minute things you can't even see and how babies are born and what happens. Like, it's just craziness. He said, Mom, what I'm learning in biology actually forces me towards God, not away from him. I want to read you something that's kind of cool. Brent Earls wrote this. He said, the stars are God's fingerprints. The sun is a mere smidgen of his radiance. The moon is to remind us that he doesn't sleep at night. The vastness of space proclaims the infinity of his wisdom, while the sand pebble indicates his thoroughness with the puniest details. The lion hints at his fearlessness, and the bear at his power, the hawk at his keen insight, and yet those possess only a tidbit of God's omnipotence and omnipresence. Every tree points towards heaven. Every bird has a song to sing. Even every moment of wind goes in some direction. There is nothing chaotic about our beautiful designed world. All creation has a message to tell. It says, listen, there is a God. There is a God. We watched a TV show. We just actually finished the whole series called Wild at Heart. It's all about Africa. It's so cool. But every time I would see an animal on that show, it would just grow my faith by leaps and bounds. Because I see a giraffe with his long neck and his beautiful brown coloring. And then suddenly you'd see a zebra with black and white stripes. And then a tiger would come on the scene with all of his pretty colors. And then you'd see a cheetah. And to top it off, you'd see elephants walking by. And I would look at these animals and I'd be like, who comes up with that? Who comes up with those beautiful creatures and just made them in different ways? And then all you have to do is look at a baby that's created with tiny little toes and ears and a little baby nose. But then all of a sudden you see them grow and they grow into big people. This made me laugh. Someone wrote, God created the mule. God told him, you will be a mule working constantly from dusk to dawn. You're going to be carrying heavy loads on your back and you're going to eat grass and you're going to lack intelligence, but you're going to live like this for 50 years. The mule goes, oh, no, God, please don't do that. Don't give us any more than 20 years. He said, that just seems like too hard of a life. So God says, okay. So then God creates a dog. And he says, you're going to watch over your master's house and you're going to be his greatest companion. But you're going to eat table scraps off of his table and live for 25 years. The dog says, no, Lord, please. 25 years is too long to live like that. We'll take 10. I said, okay, that's fine. Then God created a monkey. And he said, you're a monkey and you're going to swing from tree to tree, acting like an idiot most of your life. And you will be funny and you're going to live 20 years. The monkey goes, no, Lord, please. That's just too many years to live as like the clown of the world. Give us no more than 10. So God says, that's fine. And finally, God created man. And he said, you are man and you're the only rational being that walks the earth. You will have intelligence and to master over all the creatures of the world. You will dominate the earth and live for 20 years. But man responds like, no, Lord, 20 years, that's too little. Like, give us more than just 20 years. So God says, the man goes, give us back the time, the 30 years for the mule that he refused, the 15 years that the dog refused, and the 10 years, give us as man those years back. So God says, okay, that's fine. So God made man to live 20 years as a man, and then he would get married. And then he would live for the next 30 years like a mule, working and carrying heavy loads on his back. And then he was to have children. And he would live an additional 15 years with kids as a dog, guarding his house and eating leftovers. And then in his old age, God would give man 10 years as a monkey, acting like a fool, amusing his grandchildren. I thought, okay, I totally get that. That just does sound like life. But when I see God's amazing creature and his amazing creatures and his amazing creation, I learn something about God. Someone who's been there and done that. Because he's been there since the beginning. And this is what I learned. 1 of 5 points today. 1, God can do anything. If God can create the amazing things that he created, God can do anything. And knowing that, we should be able to relax in life. Knowing that no matter whatever happens to us personally or what happens to our nation or the world, it just doesn't matter. Because we look at the world so differently than most people do. We look at the world through the eyes of a creator God who created the world and us. And see, once we get that, then I think we become people who can trust this powerful God because we see the powerful things that he's done. But here's the problem. The problem is this, is as followers of Jesus, we start asking this powerful God for things. We're like, God, I need this, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And so we know he can do it. Because we look out the window and we see the stars at night and we see the flowers and the butterfly. If he can do that, he can do anything for us. And so we pray, God, I need you to heal my loved one. And we're shocked when God doesn't. God, I really need that job. And we're shocked when we don't get it. God, I need you to save my marriage. And we're shocked when he doesn't. And you can fill in your own blank. I know God can blank, but he doesn't. And for so many people, that's just where we get stuck. Because we see this powerful God who makes giraffes and lions and stars and the moon. And we go, if he could do that, I'm not asking for much. Why doesn't he do that for me? Which brings us to point number 2. Because the answer to that question is this. We follow him. We follow him. We pray, we ask, we believe, but in the end, we have to come to the realization as followers of Jesus that we follow him. We have seen it over and over for the past 25 weeks of what it means to actually be a follower of Jesus or to be a follower of an Old Testament as of one true God. We have learned this through all the people that they followed God. God didn't follow them. What we learn is that in the Bible, when we decide to be a follower of Christ, what we've seen is that doesn't mean you always get your prayer answered the way you want. It doesn't even mean that their life was ever easy. See, for us to get through this life on this earth, we have to learn what we've learned over the past 25 weeks, that people struggle on this earth. They just do. We've seen it with all these people. They struggle with depression and death and heartache and pain and infertility and confusion and doubt. So many of these people were like running for their life, running from a famine, running from sadness, running from their past. And what confuses us is this, that we live in America, and this American idea that God is just there to make us happy and comfortable isn't really true. See, when we decide to follow Jesus, we follow him. We follow him. Which takes us back to the question. If God can heal us and get us a job and save the marriage, then why doesn't he? And it all comes back to this. When you and I follow God, then we have to understand that God has a purpose that we may never understand, but he wants us to trust him anyway. He has purposes that we don't understand, but he calls us as a follower to trust him on those times. Do you think King David understood why he was running from King Saul all of his life? Think about all the Psalms that were written. For our benefit, thousands of years later, David didn't know that when he penned those words, that thousands of years later, people would be reading those words and learning about God because of it. See, we don't know what our life today is producing for future generations. Do you think Moses understood why he had to lead millions of whining, complaining people in the desert for 40 years? But see, for us, thousands of years later, we get to learn from Moses' life what it means to trust God, a really big God that can do miraculous things that Moses saw. When we studied Hannah, do you think Hannah even understood remotely why God would not let her get pregnant? But think of the lessons that we learned about God's timing through her sadness and when God finally gave her a baby. Do you think Job had any idea at the time why in the world he lost his children and his wealth and his employees in just a day? But think of all the lessons that we learn about God Amazing lessons about God through Job's story. See, when we decide to follow Jesus, if he doesn't answer our prayers the way we want him to, then just like Moses or David or Hannah or Job, our desire should be to allow God to use our story, however good or bad it is. All the people that we've been studying in this series, we're like, all right, God, I'm going to go through this. Totally sucks, but you know what? I'm going to trust you that you're going to use it somewhere down the line. To help others find you, God. That's what our heart should be. To help others through difficult days. And that's what we've learned all through this last 25 weeks. The third thing we learned from God who's been there and done that is this. God goes before us. I want you to really think about what that means. God goes before us. We follow the one true God who knows the future. This made me laugh. There was a frog who went to see a fortune teller because she apparently sees the future. Gazing into her crystal ball, she said to the frog, "You are going to meet a beautiful young woman. From the moment she sets eyes on you, she will have this insatiable desire to know all about you. She will be compelled to get close to you. You will fascinate her." The frog was all excited and he said, "Where am I going to meet her? Like in a singles club?" And the fortune teller said, "Well, no, actually, it's going to be in a biology class." I sent that to Dusty because he's in biology now, and he was like, I could just see him rolling his eyes. Because nobody's here to laugh at my jokes, so I thought he might, but whatever. Here's the deal. God knows your future. He knows who you will marry. He knows the job you're going to get. He knows the family you're going to be born into. He knows how many children you're going to have. And not only does he know that, but if you are a follower of Jesus, he is leading you in this world. He's leading you in your life, just like he led the Israelites. Look at Deuteronomy 31:8. And the Lord, he is the one who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Do not be fear or dismayed. Psalms 139:5. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Isaiah 52:12. But you will not leave in haste or go in flight, for the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your rear guard. Isaiah 45:2. I will go before you, and I will level the mountains. I will break down gates and bronze and cut through bars of iron. See, I really honestly think about that. God leads you into the future he has for you. Now, for some of you, right off the bat, you're like, I don't like that. I don't like that at all, because your life isn't turning out how you actually think it should. You don't like where God has led you. But that's the reason for all of these lessons, and the reason for the lesson today is to remind us to end this whole series what it really means to be a follower of Jesus. Because remember, we follow Jesus, he doesn't follow us. We serve him, he doesn't serve us. That's not how this works. Which is why if you're new to Bible study, you need to go back and listen to all 25 lessons before. Because you will see people in this series, and they will help you understand the true meaning of what it means to be a follower of Christ. If you ask me, like, Lisa, why do you believe in Jesus? And honestly, one of the reasons why is because of this, because we follow the one true God who knows the future. He knows my future. He knows the future of this entire world. Think about this. Before Jesus even shows up, we were told about it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, actually thousands of years before, all the way back in Genesis 3. We were told that there would be a Savior. He told us like 700 years before Jesus shows up where he would be born in Bethlehem in Micah 2. We see in Isaiah 7:14 that Jesus would be born of a virgin. All through the Bible. One of the main reasons why I believe is because there's over 2,000 prophecies, which is where God foretells what's going to happen before it actually happens. All of them have been fulfilled to the letter, except about 500, and those 500 have things to do with the end time scenario. See, I believe the Bible because it shows that God can see the future, and I'm going to put my money, on someone who can see the future and that has been right about it thus far. For some reason, that feels very comforting to me. The fourth thing is this. God knows how life works the best. He's been there. He's created you. He created you a specific way. He knows how life works the best. In other words, you need to stop running your life the way you think it should go. You need to stop listening to your non-Christian friends or what they're saying on Facebook or the culture or the media or whatever it is. You need to stop doing that. You need to stop taking advice from people who don't know Jesus, who don't know anything about him, and so they're going to give you worldly advice. And they're going to say, well, of course you should marry that guy. What does it matter if he's a Christian or not? Well, of course you should have sex before you get married. You need to see if it all works out okay. Of course you should sleep with your boss. Like, you need that promotion and you need the money. Like, duh. You should be able to love whoever you want. Same sex, opposite sex. Hey, God created love. You should have that affair. Why not? Your husband doesn't love you. He doesn't treat you right. But man, this guy certainly does. See, as a follower of Jesus, what needs to happen is we have to stop taking worldly advice because God knows how life works the best. Because he created the world. He created you. He created me. He created our bodies to work specific ways. He created sex to work a specific way. He created morality, right and wrong. We had this little refrigerator once that we would bring in here, and I'd be like, here's the directions for the refrigerator. Because I'm not going to know how it works if I don't read the directions. It's the same way. If you and I don't read God's directions, we're not going to know how things are supposed to work. Rob was so funny. One day he bought this thing. He was like a defroster. It's this weird little contraption that you put like a frozen roast in it, and in like 30 minutes it defrosts. Well, it comes in. There's not one instruction, none, no instruction manual, and there's all these different pieces to it. And he's like, I don't have any idea how this works. So we're going to send it back. Because if you buy something, you need to know how it runs properly. And it's the same with God. He created us a way to work properly. It's like a car. If you want your car to run efficiently, you have to use it according to how it was designed. So a car, unless it's an electric car, is designed to run on gasoline. But if you decide, I'm going to pour chocolate syrup in there, it's not going to run. Why? Because it wasn't designed to run on chocolate syrup. And you can scream and yell and be angry and mad at your car and kick its tires, but here's the deal. The only way the car is going to function properly is if you operate it the way it was designed to work. The same is true for God. Think of your electrical system in your house. We had our electricity go out about 3 times in 1 week. It kind of ruined my life because it never occurred to me how many things I use that need electricity. I'm like, oh, let me put that in the microwave. Oh, electricity. Oh, my phone is dying. Let me plug it in. Oh, I can't. Oh, my computer is at 1%. My worst nightmare in the world. Okay, I can't charge it. There's no electricity. I need a light on because it's getting dark. It's so hot in here. I need air conditioning. Electricity. It's cold. I'm freezing. I need my heater. Electricity. I need my fan on the side of my bed because I need the noise. See, you get it. It's just electricity does stuff that we need. See, our house electricity is dependent on a power line that is hooked to Arizona Public Service. But if that connection is bad, the electricity is not going to work properly, and we will have no electrical benefits in our home. What we need to learn is this. God created us to work properly when we are connected to him. That's the best way for you and I to live life on this earth, to be connected to him properly and then do what he says, because he created us. He knows what works best. Here's what I learned about Arizona Public Service and our electricity. If I want electricity in my house, I have to sign up for APS. If I never sign up for them, you know what's going to happen? I'm not going to get electricity. See, God created us to have a relationship with him. And how he did that was he sent his son Jesus and he said, in order to be plugged into God, like, you know what? You can't be plugged into a church or plugged into being a good person. He's saying in order to be plugged into God, the only way to do that is to sign up through Jesus. That's it. That's the only way. And then once you sign up to be a follower of Jesus, then you know what we do? We have to start reading the manual, the Bible. Because the Bible tells us how to live. It's the directions he has given us. It's in the Bible. God tells us how marriage should work. God tells us how we should be a good parent. God tells us how to be a good employer or employee. God tells us in his manual how we should treat people, how to forgive people, why purity matters, why getting drunk will probably hurt you, why letting anything like drugs or alcohol, anything that takes over your mind besides God, how that can destroy you. See, God created us and he has given us this manual to live by. And if we do what he says, he can bless us. It's just like the Israelites. God sends Moses to get the Israelites out of Egypt. They've been slaves there for 400 years. They don't know anything about what they're supposed to do. But God is going to bring them into this land of Israel so that they would be different and be a light. But they had a choice, just like you and I do every day. We can do what God says and be blessed, or not do what he says and be cursed. We can be blessed or cursed. Look at Deuteronomy 11:26. God says, see, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that if you obey the commands of the Lord your God that I'm giving you today. The curse is if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God and turn away from that what I command you today by following other gods which you have not known. Why? Because they had a great plan for their life. But they, like us, we have to choose God's ways over our ways. Now, this whole section in Deuteronomy is about the Israelites, and the overarching lesson is this: God has a plan to bless us. But in order to bless us, we have to do what he says in his word. Deuteronomy 11:8 says this: observe therefore all the commands I'm giving you today. Why? So that you may have the strength to go in and take over the land that you're crossing the Jordan to possess. And so that you may live long in the land that the Lord swore to your forefathers to give to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. The land you're entering to take over is not like the land of Egypt from which you've come, where you planted your seed and irrigated it by foot as in a vegetable garden. But the land you're crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of mountains and valleys that drinks rain from heaven. This is the land that the Lord your God cares for. The eyes of the Lord your God are continually on it, from the beginning of the year to its end. God is saying, look, I have a special land for you and I will provide for you, but here is what you need to do. Verse 13, so if you faithfully obey the commands I am giving you today, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, God says, I can bless you. He tells us the exact same thing today. Faithfully obey him, love him, serve him with all your heart and your soul. Because if you can't do that, then he can't bless your life. See, as a follower of Jesus, he says this: if you love me, in John 14:15, if you love me, you will obey what I command because you get it. I created this whole thing. I know what works best. And if you just do what I say, I can bless you. There's a story about a mountain climber who wanted to climb the highest mountain. He began his adventures after preparing many, many years, but he went by himself because he wanted all the glory. He wanted to be able to tell everyone he got to the top of the mountain. One night, he was climbing and there was like a blackout, like no moon, no stars, cloud covering. It was really dark. As he was climbing, he was a few feet away from the top of the mountain when he slipped and fell. He slipped and fell, and the climber could only see black spots as he went down. And he was thinking with every foot that he was going down that he was getting closer and closer to death. But suddenly, randomly, all of a sudden, he felt a rope tied to his waist pull him very hard. And his body stopped from falling, was hanging in the air, only the rope was holding him. In that moment of stillness, he had no other choice but to scream, "Help me, God." A sudden voice came from heaven and said, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "Save me." And God said, "Do you really honestly think I can save you?" And he says, "Of course I believe you can." And God said, "Then cut the rope tied to your waist. Cut the rope tied to your waist and trust me." There was a moment of silence, but the man decided, I'm not going to really listen to God. That seems a little too scary. So he held onto the rope with all of his strength. The next day, the rescue team finds his body, dead, frozen, and hanging from a rope. His hands were holding so tight to it. But the sad part is that he was only 10 feet away from the ground. See, every day you and I, we have the choice to hang on to this rope, our life, the way we do things. Or we can pick up our Bible, cut that rope, let go, and do exactly what God says. So God explains this to the Israelites, what happens when they choose to obey him. Look at verse 14. He says, I'm going to send rain on your land in its season, both autumn and spring rain, so that you may gather in your grain, new wine and oil. I will provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. But look at the warning. Every time I say warning, it always reminds me of Lost in Space. Here you go. Remember Will Robinson? Danger with his little robot. Okay, that's what I think of when God gives us a warning. But look at this warning. Be careful, or you will be enticed to turn away and worship other gods and bow down to them. For us, the warning is this. Look, I've created this whole thing. I've created you. You follow me. You do what I say. But there's always going to be something out there that is going to try to entice you. There's always going to be things that are going to be vying for your attention to take God's place. It could be work. It could be a hobby, a relationship, money, whatever. And verse 17 says, then the Lord's anger will burn against you, and he will shut the heavens so that it will not rain, and the ground will yield no produce, and you will soon perish from the good land the Lord is giving you. Isn't that amazing? God says, look, I'm going to give you everything. You just got to do the way I created it. You need to trust me. And then verse 18 says this, fix these words of your mind in your hearts and minds, and tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. In other words, God's saying, you have to know what I say. You have to know the word of God so well that you will never, ever forget. Because the Israelites' problem was they always forgot. They continually forgot what God told them. I thought this was cute. There was an 80-year-old couple that had a problem remembering. So they went to their doctor, and the doctor said, well, you need to start writing stuff down. So the couple thanked the doctor and left. And later that night, the old man got up from his chair, and his wife says, where are you going? And he goes, well, I'm going to the kitchen. She says, well, can you get me a bowl of ice cream? And he's like, sure. She goes, no. I think you're going to forget. I think you need to actually write that down, like bowl of ice cream. He's like, oh, for the love, I can remember a bowl of ice cream. She goes, well, I want some strawberries on it. He goes, that's fine, bowl of ice cream with strawberries. She goes, you probably should write it down. I don't need to write it down. She goes, all right, can you put some whipped cream on it too? Fine, got it. He fumes into the kitchen, annoyed that she said that to him. About 20 minutes later, he returns back to his wife, and he hands her a plate of bacon and eggs. And she stares at the plate for a moment. She goes, I knew you were going to mess this up. She goes, you totally forgot my toast. But that's what happens. We forget. That's what the Israelites do. That's what you and I do. If we're not constantly in the Word of God, the Bible, reading it, we will forget what God's best plan is for our life. Deuteronomy 11:18 says this, fix these words of mine in your hearts and your minds. I love it in the New Living Translation. So commit yourself wholeheartedly to these words of mine. See, we have to do something. In order to make this whole life work with God and on this earth and all these things, we have to do something. We can't just show up at church once a month and hear a verse or two. It's really about opening the Bible and letting the words of God invade our life, changing us from the inside out. And then verse 2 says this for God. He says, all these blessings will come upon you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. Because God knows how life works the best. Because he's been there. He sees what disobeying him does to people. And his heart is to keep you from that harm. The final thing is this that we can learn from God. Is that nothing can thwart the purpose of God. We say this over and over and over again. We have studied all of these people. And nothing ever got in the way when God purposed something to happen. When he wants something done, he will make it happen. That is how absolutely powerful God is. He could flood the earth and yet save one family to continue on. He could save the Jewish race by one woman, Esther. He could open Hannah's womb at the right time to have a baby so that the prophet Samuel would be born. He could part the Red Sea. He could rain plagues on the Egyptians. He could make the sun stand still. Get a load of this verse in Joshua 10, verse 13. So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jasher, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. That is the God that you and I put our trust in. A God that can stop the sun in the middle of the day from moving. But honestly, the most important, amazing thing that God has ever done is when he raised Jesus back to life from the dead. Satan's purpose was to kill Jesus forever. The Romans and the Jews wanted to kill him. They hung him on a cross. But God's purpose always overrides anyone or anything. And during this lesson, what made me so sad is this. We have lost that awe of God. We have forgotten this God that can stop the sun in the middle of the day. We've forgotten who he is and what he can do. We have forgotten that no matter where you are in your life right now, whether you want to be there or don't want to be there, that God is always in the midst of doing something that no plan can ever be thwarted of his, ever. Which means if you're supposed to get the job, you will. If you're supposed to get the guy, you will. If you're supposed to have the baby, you will. If you're supposed to become president of the United States, you will. And God will make absolute certain that will happen because he is that powerful and he is that personal and he has a plan for you and the world. Which is why I wanted to end this series with God. To remind us that he's been there in the past and in the future, actually. And he's done that. He's created the world, and we need to stop thinking that God is just up in heaven, twiddling his thumbs, doing nothing, because nothing could be farther from the truth. Everything going on this earth or in your life, he is fully aware, and he has a plan. But his ultimate plan is that Jesus will come back to this world and reign on this earth. There will be a new heaven and a new earth, and everything will be set right again. And nothing in this world, nobody in this world, world leaders, the president, Democrats, Republicans, nothing like terrorists or hurricanes or tsunamis will ever thwart the purposes of God. He's that big. So in closing today, I want to say this. There are people who claim to be followers of Jesus, and they act as if God is nowhere to be found. They don't view him as this powerful deity who can miraculously do anything that needs to be done. They forget that he created everything. They forget that anything that happens is never out of his control. They forget that he's in control of everything. And because they don't have this really awesome high view of God, someone who's been there and done that, they become fearful and anxious and they worry over silly things that don't even matter. And yet as followers of Jesus, we should be the ones promoting the awesomeness of God to everyone around us. We should be the ones helping others learn how to trust this mighty God. But for so many of us, we have this small, tiny view of him. And if he doesn't answer our prayers like we think he should, he just can't, he won't. This made me laugh. A Sunday school teacher asked the kids in her class, is there anything that God can't do? And nobody really answered until a little boy finally held up his hand. He said, well, he can't please everybody. And I thought that's cute, and that's the truth. But the problem is if God isn't pleasing you, then you get to the point of going, well, I'm not going to follow him then because I want to follow a God that does everything I want. Here's the deal. No, you don't. That's a false God and not worthy of following. I follow the God of the Bible that can do anything. Napoleon said once, God is on the side of the heaviest artillery. At Waterloo, he was proved wrong. For the 160 guns of the English overcame the 250 guns of the French. God and one makes the majority. Here's my point today. I used to have a tiny view of God. I felt like he kind of just dropped me on this planet to fend for myself. And then I picked up my Bible. And I started reading stories about people, all the people that we have studied, like Moses and David and Naomi and Esther and Job and Joseph and Paul. And suddenly God became really real to me. And what I learned is this: he is God and I am not. I learned through the series, I don't want to run my own life. I don't want to be the God of my own life. I am not that smart or powerful, and I would do a terrible job at it. I want to put my faith and trust in a God who created this whole thing like this. That's powerful. Planets and stars and galaxies, that's a powerful God. And not only did he create that, but us, intricately, as a little teeny tiny baby. I put my faith and trust in a God who cares about me and loves me and leads me and guides me. And he cares so much for us that he has given us his written word, which is the Bible. The Bible is a lamp to our path, a light to our path. It's a lamp to our feet. It's like, that's what gets us through this world. But more than the written word, he's given us the word, Jesus. To die on a cross and pay the penalty for my sin and make a way for me to spend eternity with him forever. God has done so much for us. And if there's one takeaway to this, it's study the Bible, study these people so you can get this really magnificent view of God, knowing that God can do anything, but be reminded that we follow him, and never forget that God goes before us. And we have to stand on the fact that God knows how life works the best. Always knowing that nothing can thwart the purpose of God. Because if your view of God changes, trust me, your life will change. Father, thank you for this series. Thank you for a way to end this with you. How magnificent you are. We're so grateful and thankful for all you've done for us. God, I pray today that people will understand that they need to let you run their life. God, help us to really grasp that. We want to live a good life on this earth, but we're just going false directions. Please help us to stop. Please help us to stop and start following you so that you can bless us and point more people to a relationship with you. Thank you for all you've done in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we'll see you next week for a brand new series. Have a good week.